Okay, in this video, I'm going to talk about something that, in a way, it's a pet peeve of mine because whenever I debate atheists and evolutionists, they never use their brain. In other words, it's like this. Let's see. I have a pink elephant with gray tennis shoes in my backyard. Sure, I do. Yep. Now, is that possible? I guess it's possible, but what's the probability of something like that ever happening? And, as long as an evolutionist can come up with some idiotic story, say the cow became the whale after, first of all, it came from the ocean, then it became on land, and then the cow became the whale. Well, now they say no, it's the Pakicetus that became the whale. Whatever. Okay, stuff like that, and they say, see, it's possible. Well, they always do that too. They always put the word possible in there, but they never discuss ever the probability of what they're talking about. And here's a rule from Charlie Darwin himself. This is the Charlie Darwin rule, I call it. It says, if it could be demonstrated that any complex organ existed which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications, my theory would absolutely break down, but I can find no such case. Of course, in Charlie's Darwin day, they had no idea, no clue, not a clue what was in the cell. Not a clue. And to them, it was life, in here. Okay, now, little evolutionists, put your little thinking cap on and get your imagination going now, because life at the very smallest level is just really simple, kind of little protoplasm. And you get the right mix of chemicals and poof, life could begin. See children, just keep that in your mind. And you evolutionists keep that kind of garbage in your mind. You really think that it's possible. Well, look at this. Here's something from Richard Dawkins. Okay, it says, to get an idea of the size of these protein machines, and he's talking about protein machines in the cell. In fact, I have a little video that I'll put in the description. A guy from TED Talk, he's a biologist, and he talks about how at the tip of my finger I have a half a trillion micro machines, protein machines, a half a trillion in the tip of my finger. So, and here Richard Dawkins says each one is made up of about 6,000 atoms, which is very large by molecular standards. There are about a million of these large pieces of apparatus in the cell, and there are more than 2,000 different kinds of these molecular machines, each kind specialized to do a particular operation in the chemical factory, the cell. One cell. We're talking one cell here, boys and girls. So just get your little thinking caps on. This is nothing like Darwin imagined. It is the characteristic chemical products of such enzymes that give a cell its individual shape and behavior. Well, an enzyme is nothing more than what we would consider today a molecular machine. So, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to discuss one of the molecular machines. I'm going to give there's a little video you're going to watch about origami and the ribosome.
This is a monster protein RNA complex called the ribosome. This is the molecular machine that builds proteins by reading the genetic instruction on an RNA. You don't need to worry about all these terms, just look at it, okay? That's more sophisticated than an origami crane. So this is the level that I have been looking at life for many years now, looking at individual protein molecules and asking whether they themselves are too remarkable to be coincidences. Because you have to arrange this machine is reading along an RNA that came off of a DNA gene, and that has sequence instructions, and this is the machine that is reading those instructions and putting amino acids to play, connecting them to form a long chain of amino acids that is sequenced according to the genetic sequence on the gene in order for this long chain to fold up and form one of these, a single protein molecule with these really elegant three-dimensional forms. There's thousands of these forms that have been cataloged now. I'm just showing you a few so you can get an idea of how sort of visually attractive they are, but also how varied they are. They come in all kinds of different shapes, and those shapes are critical for what they do. If you were sitting with someone who had a red piece of paper and they crumpled it up and threw it on the table and it looked like this, you could say, or I could say, that reminds me of the head of an elephant. Do you see the trunk, the big head, the ears? But it's not spooky, right? You would think, oh my goodness, how did you make the head of an elephant by crumpling up red paper? Because you have to sort of impose the head of an elephant on that, right? It's not compelling. You can see it when I point it out, but it's not really that remarkable, is it? Whereas if you see this red piece of paper on a table, you know somebody has done something to that piece of paper. If a 4-year-old who had never experienced origami, had never done anything with origami, never seen an origami crane before, came into a room, there's no one in the room, and they see that on the table, they know, he or she knows that someone did that, right? Someone made that, and they also think, I want to know how to do that, right? That's the way kids think. The number of steps you have to go through to get that crane, and even with these directions, you're probably not going to get it right, okay? The number of steps you have to go through to get an origami crane is too numerous, and each step requires too much precision in order for that to happen by accident. You don't need a calculator in the end, because whether it's 10 octillion or, far beyond that, you don't need the number. It just can't happen. And that's why these things are so obvious. That's why you don't need to be an expert. So a lot of these do chemistry. They are molecular machine parts. You saw a diagram of the flagellum. All of those pieces of flagellum are protein chains that fold up to the right form to make that flagellar motor. And the question that I was asking when I embarked on this at the protein level was, how fussy is the order of these amino acids in this chain in order for it to form a shape that will actually work in a cell? The number, if you want the probability for getting the protein fold, is 1 in 10 to the 77th power. That's 1 in a trillion, 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 trillion. A little bit worse than that, but I got tired of saying trillions. So it's like having laser points, laser dots the size of hydrogen atoms. That's a very small laser dot. And the ceiling would be the size of the backdrop of the visible universe. Okay? All right? Think about that. One dot, hydrogen atom, hidden at the backdrop of the visible universe, and something blindly searching that huge shell, hoping that these two hydrogen atoms, oh, you were close. You were so close. But it's just not going to happen. Obviously not going to happen.
Okay, so in the video, of course, you saw the ribosome monster machine. Basically it's a chemical factory. Well, what does it do? Well, it churns out other proteins, and each one of the proteins is made up of hundreds of amino acids. So that's exactly what it does. And then, by the way, the ribosome itself is made up of what? Proteins? Chicken and the egg problem. Which came first, the ribosome or the messenger RNA, the transfer RNA? To give you a little idea, I've got a little blurb of like what goes on inside the cell and how many different processes. And this is, of course, not exhaustive. This is just something to highlight the different systems and again, very sophisticated systems that are needed. But, so inside the cell, in the middle of the cell, you got the nucleus. Inside the nucleus is a genome. The genome is made up of chromosomes. Inside the chromosomes is DNA. DNA is packed around the histone proteins. Well, within the DNA are sections called genes. These genes contain the instructions, the specified complex information, the software instructions for making proteins. Then you have a molecular machine called the RNA polymerase. It is not RNA. It's a molecular machine that is needed to make messenger RNA. And guess what? The RNA polymerase must already be. So what does it do? Well, it attaches to the start of the gene in the DNA, and it reads along, and then it builds the messenger RNA molecule out of the free bases in the DNA. So it's the DNA code, the software instructions, that determine the order of the creation of the messenger RNA molecule. This process they call transcription. So please do me a favor. Don't just skip over this fact. The RNA molecule, the messenger RNA molecule, is manufactured both from information in the DNA and requires a molecular machine we call the RNA polymerase. Both have to be there at the same time. So, fact, the RNA molecule is not, in this case, produced by chemical evolution. Fact, all these systems are interdependent, and all must be in place at the same time for this process to work. Now, what then happens after the RNA, the messenger RNA is created, it is let loose and it goes through the nucleus of the cell into the cytoplasm and then hooks up with the ribosome monster machine, which then churns out more proteins. So again, this shows you, this list shows you all of the different systems, membranes, the genome, the DNA, the messenger RNA, the molecular machine called the RNA polymerase, the cytoplasm, the ribosome. All this stuff has to be there for this to work. And don't forget, the DNA, the information has to be there to make it all work. And it all has to be there all at the same time. So, quote, "It has now been demonstrated that a complex biological system exists which could not possibly have been formed by numerous successive slight modifications. My theory has absolutely broken down." Charles Darwin, Origin of the Species. And to just simply wave all that away and say, oh, well, we don't know how it happened, but, you know, we'll get there. No, what's going on here is, guess what? It's getting harder and harder and more complicated, and you're adding layer upon layer upon layer. Charles Darwin didn't know any of this. He could just say, okay, boys and girls, just, you know, put your little thinking cap on and put your imagination together. And that's what you guys do. You just put your little imagination together and see if you can coax your little brain into believing that all this stupendous complexity, a billion times greater than a space shuttle, and you're going to tell me that it just happened by chance. And it's built, listen to me, it's built at the microscopic level. Microscopic level. You got 1 million of those machines in there. You have 500 billion of those machines at the tip of your finger. And you're going to tell me all of that came about by chance. What nonsense. What utter nonsense for you to believe that. Just out of hand, you won't even give an ounce of thought to an intelligence that's way beyond whatever we can think of, because we can't create a cell. We have no idea how to create a cell. We have no idea how to put one of those together, even with a brain, even with all the computer technology, etc. and stuff we have. We don't even have a clue how it started, and we've just scratched the surface on the cell. And you think you're going to be able to eventually figure out, okay? So anyway, what nonsense. Have a good day. Thanks. Bye.